Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is a podcast about the intersection of product management and product design. I'm not going to be able to keep this energy up through the whole thing. I shouldn't have started so high, right? Let me introduce our wonderful guest for today's podcast, which is a very special one. Actually, no product management in it at all. It's just product design. So there we go. Tali Lorena. Hello, Tali. How are you?
I'm doing good. Great today. Thank you for inviting me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Let's just start by saying how we know each other. So I worked at Meridia, the organization you're now working for.
Yes.
We haven't really worked together at the company, did we? Because I kind of left when you were starting, but now I'm doing a bit of mentoring for you as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I actually really appreciate the benefit that I got from Meridia when I was joining. It's been more than a year that we meet every other week, and you help me with my day-to-day tasks, with my career growth, with some challenges. Like it actually includes a little bit of even psychotherapy when it's needed.
It's been an absolute pleasure. You are the person that I think is most responsible for why we're here today, actually, because today the special subject that we're talking about is AI in design, right? It's kind of inevitable. And the reason that you're so important in this discussion is that I think you were the one that really turned me on to this idea, right? You were the one that said, look at how we're able to use some of these new Gen AI technologies inside design. And I wasn't necessarily a naysayer. I wasn't like, oh, no, I'm not interested. But I'm certainly a little bit, for someone who's been into emerging technology for decades now, a little bit reticent to sort of jump into things with 2 feet, especially tools and technologies that you use for your sort of daily professional life. And I think once you showed me some of the things that were possible, that's totally opened my eyes and it changed my perspective. So should we talk a little bit about what we're going to cover today in this session?
Yeah, I think absolutely.
Okay.
We have a lot.
So we are going to cover a lot. Yeah. We're going to try and talk about basically, hey, there he is. Okay. No, we need to do the third introduction. Then introduce our friend.
That's my dog, Isa. He participates in every meeting and in every activity I do.
Yeah. We've instantly got another 1,000 subscribers there because your dog is now in this podcast. So thank you for that. Oh, what's your dog's name?
Isa.
Isa. There we go. Perfect. Beautiful. And is he AI or is he a real dog?
Well, sometimes I think he is AI.
Yeah, okay. So look, we're going to start by talking about what we think, you and I both think, are some of the sort of impacts of AI technologies in the product domain space, and cover some of the experiences that we've had. We're going to do a deep dive into a couple of practical examples. So you've got a great example of how you've used Gen AI, and LLMs for some of your work at Meridia. And I'm going to dive into it and talk about how I've used it to basically rebuild my entire portfolio, one of many little projects I've got going on at the minute. And then we're going to sort of wrap up with some tips and tricks. So things that we've learned along the way and recommendations. And then we're going to talk about what we think the future holds for AI as well. Let's start at the beginning. What tools are you using at the moment? Like, what are the most important sort of AI tools in your design life right now?
Yeah, so in terms of AI, I actually started from V0, and then Meridia has like automatical subscription for Figma Make or Figma AI, and I started using that because it felt more convenient. And at first I didn't like it, to be honest, because it was a little bit of lagging and but at this point, I think it works good, and basically it produces the same results as a V0 in terms of prototypes. So I also join it with ChatGPT. So basically, I kind of incorporate these two together, and I start, for example, when I start new initiative, I start with ChatGPT, then I move to Figma Make or V0. So yeah, that's mostly it.
Amazing. We're probably going to have to rewind a little bit and talk about what some of these tools are, because maybe not everyone's familiar with what maybe V0 is. So I'm sure everyone's familiar with ChatGPT, and I'm sure a lot of people are already using that in the design space. You mentioned Figma Make as well, and again, I'm sure that's something that a lot of people are familiar with. But we mentioned V0 there. Can you tell us a little bit more about V0?
Yeah, basically V0, it's very similar to Figma AI. You can use prompts and create projects there. They also have this coding part, etc. So it's pretty similar. And in V0, you are able to build good prototypes, and the quality of these prototypes are the same as in Figma, I would say. So like,
Okay, that's interesting, isn't it? So V0 creates real code. So the
yeah,
prototypes that
yeah,
you're creating
exactly.
are actually like, they're not Figma prototypes in the sense that they're flat screens and they're linked. They're
Yeah.
actually code prototypes. How do you see the sort of, let's dive straight into the weeds on this, right? So how do you see the transition going from your code prototype in V0, which is
Mhm.
effectively code, right?
Yeah.
And it is a real working thing, to the production code that ends up in the product that's released. How does that transition work?
Well, we never like did this transition, to be honest. We basically build the prototype, we test it with our users, we show it like to our developers, basically to validate the solution. We also show it sometimes to our stakeholders, some experts in our field. So basically, our prototype, it's like mock-up of the future product or future feature. But our developers, they do use like another libraries, another type of libraries, and they basically don't use code from V0 right now.
Right. Okay. So, you're using V0's prototypes in the same way you would use an old school Figma prototype. It's just there
Exactly.
to sort of do a job, and then the engineers rebuild it in their own way with their
Yeah.
own code. Okay. That's interesting, isn't it? But I think that could all be changing soon as well. And we can get onto that when we talk about the future later on. Okay. That's cool. So we've mentioned ChatGPT, we've mentioned V0, we've mentioned Figma Make. There's a couple that I wanted to mention as well, a couple of tools that I've been using a lot of. So I've been using Claude Code and Cursor.
Yeah.
So those are two platforms for building code. And actually, I have been building production quality code for some projects that I've got on the go at the moment with my design studio, and they are full kind of database backed, web server backed, full effectively SaaS products that I use with Superbase for the database, and I use Render for the APIs backends as
Hmm.
well. But none of those are API, none of those are AI technologies. They're just infrastructure platforms that I, using Cursor and Claude Code and a lot of patience, as we'll go into in a minute, to actually sort of build out the infrastructure on those platforms for me. So I can actually build an entire sort of SaaS product, using those tools. But they are quite different, I think, aren't they? Claude Code, Cursor, I know Codex from OpenAI. Those are kind of tools to help engineers build actual real production code. Whereas what
Yes.
we're talking about with V0 or Figma Make is something that's much more kind of for the designer, and where the code probably wouldn't end up, in a production app. Would you say that's true?
Yes, I do know that you use it, and I really impressed with what you are able to do there, and that you basically you have a full capability to be a developer, designer, QA engineer in the same body. We use Cloud at Meridia, and I know that it's like really working well. We kind of still exploring the ways how we can connect it with Figma Make or with V0, or how we can basically kind of incorporate this design, and that it will be working already as a code for us. So I think it's next step. It's close future.
All right, and that's a great segue. What you mentioned there about giving, a bit for me being able to do basically coding, effectively full on software engineering. I really love this idea of the design inventor,
Yeah.
actually, and it's this concept. Yeah, and it came to me as a bit of an epiphany in the shower, as these things always do, right? A few weeks ago, and I thought an inventor is someone who has an idea and then has the engineering knowledge to sort of bash it together with spanners and bits of metal in their workshop, right? Well, you know that's us now, right? As designers, we can come up with these ideas, we can be the creatives, but we can also then execute on that stuff using
Exactly.
AI as our kind of intermediaries. Well, that makes us inventors. So I'm gonna now call us design inventors, if that's okay.
I love this term because it's quite representative, I would say. Even like even though in my case we still don't have this like full process for the implementation of these prototypes, it still like feels that basically I can build the whole logic, I can build the full solution, which everyone, it's literally the same as it works on production after it was implemented. The only thing that is missing right now, it's like, for example, these AI tools, they are not capable to reproduce design that I created in Figma the same way that I want to be, like the same polished way that it will be built by our engineers. That's it.
Okay, let's dig into that, because I think those you've mentioned two of possibly the most important points there for the current state of the art. So you mentioned that it's not that your prototypes that you're creating right now are actually real code and they actually work and they've got real logic. Can you talk a little bit about that for a second, actually?
Yeah, so basically, like, I'm trying to absolutely mimic the, like, not visually, I mean, but by the logic, by how it works. I'm always trying to mimic the potential future solution with these prototypes. Since we also have to like introduce our development team into these prototypes, that's really important to build the logic as close to reality as possible. But yeah, it was very helpful, especially since at Meridia we work with quite complex quite complex logic, and it's complex tool that basically, yeah, it kind of helps me to explain how should it work. And also, for example, when we introducing some new feature, it's like something absolutely new, and developers are trying our prototype, and then they're like, yeah, and then basically, kind of before I even start designing and spend time in Figma, I already have working solution where I can present it, so we can iterate on a go, not like afterwards or something like that. I'm a little bit drifted away, I feel like, but it's okay.
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense. So traditionally, we would have written those bits of logic down either as comments in the Figma file or as
Oh yeah,
requirements in the user story ticket, and inevitably edge cases would get missed, or stuff would only come out when it actually gets into the engineering phase and actually gets into the build phase later on. So do you see this as being some kind of like potential new way of documenting the design, what the experience should be? Or do you think that this would always sit alongside some of the more traditional ways of documenting logic?
well, it definitely simplifies the process of documenting. So I still believe that we should have some kind of documentation. Not, I hate long documentation, but at least something we should have. But I would say that what it helped with, that when you like just drafting the solution, or when you are creating product requirements, etc., you kind of have something in your head. You cannot touch it, feel it, and check how it works. And this is minus. These prototypes, they can be created within like 1 hour. So it's like you just created, then you checked it out, and well, this solution won't work. You already showed it like within 10 minutes to your developers. Then you got back, redone the prototype, check it out again. So it's like it's such a, it speed ups the process. And after you created this prototype, you already like the requirements will be easy to update or like to change something. So basically, this is like maybe it sounds a little bit chaotic, but it's like this iterative process that you just build. And from my experience, that since I started using this prototyping, checking out my solutions like on a go, I would say that my design process speed up.
I've also noticed, because I'm doing exactly the same thing now as well, and I've also noticed that it really helps me with my creativity as well, with my design iteration, because I can actually see something really quickly that's realizing a vision that I might have. I can test that in, just within myself, with just by looking at it myself and going, oh yeah, that clearly doesn't work, and fix it before it really goes anywhere else, so you can
Exactly.
kind of explore those ideas. The other thing that I would say as well that's been really useful is early stage pivoting. So you might come up with 2 or 3 different options for something traditionally, and then you might do a couple of Figma frame screens to mock it up. And that's as much as those options might get explored. So when you're in that early kind of discovery phase, you might end up
Yeah.
doing 3 or 4 of these options. And then actually one of those might be a really compelling option, but because it's not being articulated well enough to the stakeholders, other people who are making calls on feasibility and, whether that's the direction they want to go in, that option might be the best one, but it might not get sort of picked as the one to
Yeah,
go with. But of course, if you can sort of almost fully realize, all of the options, or most of the options, that's just such a powerful way of articulating an idea, isn't it? And it basically
exactly.
gives all the ideas the sort of
Yeah.
value and the right they need.
And sometimes we are working with extremely, like, let's say, sensitive or like impactful initiatives, which can like really mess up something in future. So like it's very important to deliver them in high quality, and a lot of people involved in the process to speed up the process of these alignments and checking out with all our like stakeholders or experts from other teams. That's actually, you just make a short Loom video with explanation, send the prototype link, and you can get feedback immediately.
Yeah.
It's really like game changer for me. That's
Yeah.
for sure.
It is a game changer. All right. But I think this is enough gushing about AI, right? I think we need to get into the weeds and talk about some of the pain that we've experienced, right? So look, it's not all roses, right? We're at the very early stages of the use of AI in design, and
Exactly.
we're coming up against some of the rougher parts of it. I think at the moment you and I have both experienced this. Let's talk a little bit about some of those challenges and some of the specific problems that we've had to work around with, and their limitations of the current technology, right? Can you talk a little bit about some of the iterations that you've had to do in things like V0 and Figma Make?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I want to start that I already mentioned one of the problems, that right now it's very difficult to basically in Figma and in V0 to mimic the designs, especially complex designs. So even though like in Figma I can use like attaching the design system file or some other like some mockups, etc., but it still kind of doesn't do a good job. The same goes to V0. So this part is off as of now. It's getting better though, but it's still kind of on a first steps of development. Also, there are like this stupidity thing sometimes happening, stupidity mode I call it, because like at some point or out of nowhere the AIs tend to get stupid and give you absolutely like weird results and information, etc. So this is something that bothers me a lot, to be honest. The more complex logic in prototype you would like to implement, the more iterations you have, the more often it goes to this stupidity mode. So basically, kind of some bugs and laggings they're happening. I kind of have some tips and tricks for that, but we will get to that. But yeah, that's my main pain points, I would say, as of now.
Yeah, this stupidity mode thing. I love that phrase that you came up with. I think it really does describe it, and I see it a lot in the code prototypes that I build as well with Claude Code and Cursor. And just to describe it for people who have not experienced it, it's where the system basically lies to you, isn't it?
Exactly.
It says I've done this thing. Well, you ask it to do a thing, and it says, okay, yep, done that thing. Oh, it's really amazing. It's really excited about how it's found the problem. It says, I found the problem. I know exactly what the problem is. No, this time I've got the right problem. This time I've figured out what the root cause problem is. It's this, and I've fixed it. And you you get it to build it, and you have a look at it, and it's like,
It's the
you've
same.
not done anything. You've
Yes.
literally not done anything.
Yes, it's so terrible. I hate this when it happens. I also had, I think I mentioned the story, but I did with ChatGPT some analysis of user interview, and I added like transcript as a PDF and asked to make an analysis. Like he came up with answer, and I read it, and we never talked about that with this user. It wasn't in the PDF.
Yeah.
So it kind of come up with kind of answer. I think like sometimes I feel like AIs hope that we won't read what they answered.
We just take it as truth and just move on. Yeah.
So yeah, that's funny.
And I think that's obviously the other massive challenge with AIs right now. They don't know when they've made a mistake as well, or they're
Yeah.
not aware of it. So
exactly.
they may think that they've fixed a problem, but or they may think they've got an answer for something, but they're basically just hallucinating. And
Yeah,
we mustn't forget as well that these systems work by predicting what the next thing should be, right? That's how they work broadly. So if you're getting them to write something for you, they're just sort of predicting what the next best word should be in a
yeah,
sentence, right? That's literally how they're working. And if they're writing some code to build you a prototype, they're literally writing, right, what should the next bit of code be? Obviously there's much more kind of intelligent systems that are going on around that as well, to do planning and to do our code architecture and knowledge of the different code syntaxes. There's lots of
yeah,
complex stuff going on, but I mean fundamentally that's where they get to, that's what they're doing. And it does mean that they will lie confidently, and you won't know the difference between a lie and a truth, because the system will tell you both in equal kind of confidence.
yeah.
And I think people have seen this with ChatGPT and lying to them about stuff that they know isn't true confidently, and that happens as well with the other tools. And it's my experience, even with the latest versions of Claude Code and Cursor and Codex and Gemini 3, that it's still just as much of a problem. They still lie to you. They sort of don't realize when they're doing it as well.
Yeah, our engineers also complain about this a lot, but still, we want to use it. We believe in AI future, and it
Yeah.
still kind of does a job. Maybe, yeah, with some problems, but it does this job. We have already shipped a couple of features where I even wasn't involved. So basically, Claude kind of, there weren't that much design, but the feature in terms of backend, it was quite complex. So, and it was done by, so it was something about integration or something.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it helps a lot. But sometimes, yeah, the stupidity mode, hallucinations, etc.
Yeah, yeah. But I think, the solution to that is kind of obvious, really, isn't it? Is that you don't become so over reliant on these technologies, and you don't give over your authority to these technologies to do your job for you. They are a tool, and like any other tool, you should stay in control, right? You should be the person to review all the work and double check it effectively. So
Exactly.
I think,
So what I see like for the future, we need to be like all operators of AI in
yes.
our own fields, but we need to be able to use it as a tool for work. It's a helper, but again, you cannot just like let it go without control. So
Yeah,
right, I
that's a
hope it.
really good point. I think this was one of the biggest concerns, wasn't it, especially in the design community, about Gen AI replacing design jobs. And,
Yeah.
that just isn't the future.
Mm,
Or it's certainly not the present. And I don't think it's the future in the next few years, certainly, with the current technologies that we're seeing. We'll talk more about that at the end. But
yeah.
one other little story I wanted to mention about the challenges of AI, and it's something I've experienced as well, is that one of the people on the team that I've been working with, a sort of more junior designer, someone who maybe lacks a little bit more of the kind of architectural experience that maybe a senior engineer, sorry, this is a not designer, an engineer, a
Hmm.
more senior engineer would have. Maybe they've been around the block a few times, they know the lay of the land, and they know what to spot in code that may not be the best from an architectural and style perspective. I can hear some snoring. Have you fallen asleep?
It's my dog.
The dog's like, I disagree with this point of view.
Oh my god.
Entirely.
He needs to
Love that.
insert himself in every situation.
I know.
Seriously.
I know. We've all been there. This engineer, I think, maybe did become a bit too reliant on some of the code that Cursor was putting out, and ended up sort of building stuff that actually needed quite a lot of re-architecting work by hand
Hmm.
in the end. And so, that point about oversight, I think, is really important. And it was for
Yeah.
engineering in that particular case, but it's very much the case for design as well. You don't want these systems to design you into a corner, or to design something that runs away with you, and you don't really own or have accountability or understanding for as well. So I think, yeah, it's very much important for us to sort of stay on top of these tools and treat them as tools rather than
Yes,
as
exactly.
replacements
This
for
is
us.
tools, absolutely. And I've heard a lot of stories very similar to yours, especially like on the like more like entry level positions or roles that Sometimes people start over rely on it, but yeah, there could be like problems with that. So we also always need to keep in mind that we need to check it out, double check, etc.
One case though that I think we've started doing a bit of it in the project I'm currently working on is to use Cursor. And let's just quickly remind people of what Cursor is. So Cursor and Claude Code and things like Codex from OpenAI, the maker of ChatGPT, these are all kind of tools, AI engineering tools, right? So they'll write a whole code for you, and it's what I use for building some of these sort of side projects that I'm engineering as well at the moment. So Cursor is one of those kind of suite of tools. The thing that I think is nice about Cursor is that it actually is a kind of layer above all of these these actual kind of baseline technologies. So it calls on the right AI. So it may call on Google's Gemini, or it may call on Codex, or it may call on Claude, Anthropic's Claude Code, depending on which one is the best for the job it needs to get done. And so that's quite neat. But so that's Cursor. The point I think is really interesting here is that we've got an issue tracking system called Linear that we've been using, which is very similar to Jira or any other tool you might use in a product team. And Cursor has been directly integrated with Linear, and that is really quite exciting. So one of the things we've been trialing is this idea that you might have those kind of classic, low hanging fruit pieces of design tweaking that you want to do in a product. Something is a couple of pixels out, or the radius on that button isn't quite right, or that color isn't as it should be in the style guide, or that bit of copy is not right. Well, getting those things fixed, we know as designers how important it is that those things are correct, right? Like, we design them for a reason. They're part of a holistic view of a whole product and how it should be. When they're not fixed, when they're not aligned, it's the death of 1,000 cuts for an experience, right? It just undermines trust. But that is very difficult to argue, justify in a product team. And a lot of these tickets usually get, at the bottom of the backlog. It's very difficult. Yeah, exactly. It's very difficult to get them pushed up. But with Cursor, so the designer's engineering tool, and Linear, I found that we can create these tickets. We can actually write them ourselves in Linear. And then rather than assigning those tickets to an engineer, you can assign it to Cursor. And then Cursor will go away, read your ticket. So you've got to be quite descriptive in it. You've got to have, you like you would do with an engineer normally, you've got to be very explicit about what it is you want to change and why. So Cursor will read the ticket. Cursor will understand the need. It will then go away, check out all the code into its own little branch, just like an engineer would. It makes the fix. And then it makes you a link or a release link that you can then go to verify what it's done. And if it's not right, then you just reply to it in Linear like you would do a human engineer. And you say, that's not quite right. Can you make it this instead? And it would go off and make those changes and come back to you. And then once it's fixed the thing, once it's got something is acceptable, what you wanted it to do, you can then tell it to create this thing called a PR, a pull request, which is basically a kind of package of changes that then get put into the pot of all the other package of changes that all the other engineers are doing. And then a real human engineer has to look at that and basically approve it. It's not designers having kind of carte blanche control to go in and mess with everything in the product. There are these very well established, organized patterns for how engineers build code, even within other engineers. And this tool, Cursor and Linear integration, gives us the ability to kind of play in that space as well for lightweight things. And so I think that is a sort of thin end of a wedge that I think is quite interesting, actually, from a design perspective.
Actually, this is great. And I've seen your results and find that it's potentially it would solve so many problems, at least in my head, that I have all backlog of this kind of tickets. Unfortunately, we still use Jira, and right now it doesn't have this integration. Maybe in future it will appear. I hope so. If not, we also use Cursor for solving like smaller tasks right now. So basically, I think that at some point we can more rely on that, and maybe I will be able to just explain it, etc., and like in prompt, and then we will go from there. But yeah, that's a future.
Yeah. And then before we move on to some examples, and we talk about the challenges of of AIs in design. We've talked a lot about these tools as basically engineering
Yeah.
functions for designers, right? So to give designers a tool that will allow them to build stuff. But what about designing stuff? You know, because this is obviously the area that I think a lot of the rest of the industry are interested in, non-designers. It's like, how much design can these AIs do? What's your view on the current state of the art in terms of these AIs doing design work?
Basically, it's getting better. I've checked a couple of things lately in terms of like how Figma Make is how Figma integrates the designs, etc. It's getting better, but I wouldn't say that we are there. I also try to like work with some illustrations and more like characters, etc. So this is something that I actually quite impressed how it works, but our boring interface devices are not yet there, but it's getting there. I even
When
can compare.
you say characters there that you
Yeah,
were
yeah,
building. Oh dear, tell us some more about that.
yeah. It was like for just more like for fun because I used it's. I think it was Adobe AI,
Hmm.
and yeah, like I had a friend, like I was helping friend with her, like her site, and I did like a set of little illustrations in watercolor style, So yeah, that was it. Nothing serious, just but the problem was that we wanted to have like the same style, which is we get to that. Um, it was a little bit difficult to basically kind of create different poses with the same characters.
Mm.
So it would create in the same style, but every time it would be different character, a little
Oh, yeah.
different character. So that was like a little bit annoying because it was really difficult to get to the point because we wanted to character would represent her, the
Yep.
professional, and it was like every time it's a little different. It's a little different. So yeah, that was the case.
Okay, and yeah, that's interesting. So I think for me that aligns with where I think we're at the moment as well. I think it's quite good as a technology for allowing us to explore ideas, but there's no way on earth that I would be using current Gen AI technology to actually create designs that I would put forward as my own. Even in things like Claude Code, you know, I can get it to, I can say to it, I want a dialogue that's going to show these options and is going to do this, this, and this, and it will build a dialogue with a transparent background
Mm-hmm.
so that it's kind of completely, it's just not even just like from an accessibility point of view, not conformant, it's just wrong. You know, and it's really verbose. It seems to want to explain everything, you know, and I know these are simple things, and you know, I'm sure that you could dial this in and out, you know, at a tool level, but you can really see, I think, at this stage, the lack of holistic thinking. You know, if you ask it to build, and again, this comes back to them working at kind of junior level right now
Yeah.
and not even midway. If I asked a junior designer to go and think about a preference panel, a settings panel, for example, something fairly self-contained, I would imagine that they would just think about that particular area, what the requirements are for that area. They wouldn't really consider much of the rest of the experience
Mm-hmm.
and how that particular piece of the product might interact with other parts of the product. And that seems to be how AIs work as well. If you give them a task, they'll be sort of very narrowly focused on that task, and they won't really consider or understand the bigger implications of the rest of the product and the experience you're trying to build as well. So yeah, I think at the moment they're not good enough for generating design for that very reason.
Yeah, I completely agree. I actually tend to use AIs for ideation rather than also final kind of implementation. So, for example, I have quite a complex thing to design, and I know that I can solve it this way, what other way. And so I would just write a prompt to ChatGPT, ask for suggestions, and sometimes it comes with some ideas that I didn't consider. So I would have more options to explore. So that was helpful. But again, I
Well,
would work on that.
okay, so that is a really good segue into the next section, where we're going to talk about a couple of actual concrete examples of how we've used AI to help us in our design work. So you're going to do one, I'm going to do one. So yeah, over to you, Tali. Do you want to get started?
Meridia actually, it's very interesting and complex product which allows users from huge enterprise companies or smaller companies who import some products abroad to European Union, check the compliance of the farms where they get the products with EU regulations. It's mostly connected to deforestation. For example, if some coffee was grown on indigenous people territory, this is like sustainability sector, and the product it's very complex. Since we have a lot of data, we need some way to sort this data and see specifics and some, for example, sort one farm plot out of 2 millions. I don't know. It's a lot. So for that reason, we have Query Builder. And Meridia Portal, it's quite a young product, I would say. This is how it was looking before. As you can see, it's a lot of fields that takes almost all of the page. And underneath it, usually we have little table with the results. So this table was also scrollable, and it would take it's like vertical scroll of this table was like, I think, two screens or something around. So
Wow.
it was
Okay,
like,
yeah.
and to sort this data, we need to wait up to 30 seconds. So it would take like ages to basically to load, and therefore the like usability of this page was like absolutely terrible. And we've noticed also, since we were adding some functionality to this page, especially like reporting functionality, we started seeing much more traction on this page. So before that, users didn't usually use this page that much. And right now we've got a lot of feedback about the performance issues, that these filters are not understandable, etc. So we decided to invest time into redesign of these filters.
There's also, because I'm aware of this product from having worked on it a little bit myself as well, like the query builder is part of the core value proposition of the product as well, isn't it? You know, it's like kind of one of the windows into this amazing data set that Meridia have.
Yes, exactly.
So there was a kind of commercial imperative as much as a kind of UX imperative to solve this problem and make this as good as it could be.
And yes, we had a bit of a discovery user interviews, also just gathered feedback over the year, etc. So kind of we were ready. We had like quite a lot of information that we kind of already were like, okay, this is the place to start. I will dive into this a little bit just to give a little bit more context. So users comes to Query Builder in like three main use case scenarios. So the 80% of users comes to Query Builder with already selected data set. Previous version of Query Builder, it would show all data sets that you already have in the product, right? And all farm plots of theirs. So for example, I think I have in my profile, I have like around 2 million farm plots. So can you imagine how long it will take to load them all?
Yeah, long time.
And right now we know that usually users don't need to see all data sets. This is already, this is like a huge, huge thing. 15% of users comes with their own kind of search request. So they search specific farmer ID or specific farm plot ID. So it's 15% of cases. And the 5, it's like, I think it's our power users. Therefore, we didn't want to cut them off. They still want to compare different data sets. They still kind of add more than one data set. We see that they use filters more intentionally. We see that they spend time there, actually much more time than others, but they exploring something. So there are some kind of goal behind that. So that's why we also wanted to support them in our future solution. So yeah, our goal was to cover these three main use cases. Then also these filters took way too much space on the screen. So we wanted to minimize space for that, and basically more like group filters or get rid of some of the filters. And of course, the main goal, the pivot, was to improve performance from this 30 seconds of loading time. Yeah, so moving next, what we did, like we had all this documentation from discovery, we had interviews, feedbacks, data, and what I did, I just fed everything into ChatGPT, I wanted to mention as well that we never share with AIs customer data or any sensitive data, because we all know that the security is a must, especially right now.
It's a really important one, isn't it? So you never fed GPT with any sort of customer identification data, nothing that would
No,
personally identify them, and that is because any data that you provide to GPT will almost certainly be used to train it and
absolutely.
could be made available to other people. So I think, yeah, that's a really important point to point out at this stage, isn't it, in terms of security and privacy?
Yeah. And that's actually was one of the main concerns once we started using AIs inside of the company, that is it even safe for our customers, for our product to use that? So they did, I know that our developers, they did quite an extensive research on that, and to make sure that we use it properly.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I kind of drafted the idea of the solution, so that we have these three main use cases and how, like, the logic behind these use cases as well. And what I did, I just fed it and asked to, like, suggest improvements, UI UX improvements, which it did.
Would you say that this is the first time in this process for this product that you'd used AI so far? Or were they just sort of more traditional design work with humans?
Well, I did use AI before that, of course. For example, when I was writing a report about recording, so I drafted the report and then I asked it to improve this report and structure it better. So that was, and like create some action points, etc. So something like that, but it wasn't like for prototyping or something. So it was more the prep work.
Okay, so this is probably the first point in the process where you're doing something quite unique that maybe other designers might not have tried to do themselves. Yeah, okay, interesting.
I also wanted to mention that since I was using before like AIs, I noticed that it's very, very helpful to keep one chat for one initiative. For example, because you start like with discovery, you do some reports, etc. So you fed it with information. Then you do some prototypes. I actually also share the links from Figma with ChatGPT to check maybe some, like, give me feedback on the prototype, etc. So there are like a lot of communication in these chats, and in the end, right now I pay a lot of attention to copy, and we have quite a tricky product where sometimes it's very difficult to explain. So the copy is also a key part of that. And in the end, when I already like do some copywriting for the project, actually it works really well if it has this all context. So this was really helpful. So one initiative per project, that was a really good approach to take.
That point is really important as well, isn't it? The point of context. And just to reiterate, in case people aren't aware of what that means, so that is a kind of frame of reference that the system has on a particular problem or a conversation you're having. So in ChatGPT, you might be used to context by each of the different chats that you create with it. So it has this kind of shared memory or shared understanding of you as an individual, but the thing that you're discussing with it might be booking a holiday, or in this case, talking about this particular project. By keeping the conversation inside that context window, as they call it, then you're able to refer to stuff that you've talked about previously. It may have been days ago, it may have been weeks ago, in fact, but keeping that context window, keeping the discussion and the iterations within that context window helps the system to have a kind of wide understanding of what the problem space is.
And again, also, like, it sees the language that you use in documentation, for example, etc. So like this was helpful. So I asked about this for Figma, and what the prompt was quite long, but it was really great in terms of the structure of the potential solution. However, the first result wasn't looking nice. I even didn't understand what was there, to be honest. So basically it messed up everything, and I don't know what has happened. This is about stupidity mode, to be honest.
So just to be super clear about what's happened, you've used ChatGPT to create a prompt for Figma Make, feeding it all that data that you just mentioned. And then GPT has created that prompt for Figma Make, and then you've put that into Figma Make, and then this is what it's created.
Yes. By the way, I wanted to mention that the structure of the first prompt from ChatGPT was great, but it had quite a few things that wouldn't align with the future solution, like the solution that I had in mind. So I
Interesting.
also was iterating a little bit on prompt in order to basically kind of create the version that would kind of represent my solution, my idea of the solution.
Okay, and that's another important point, isn't it? Is iteration. You
Yeah.
cannot expect anything you get out of these systems from a design perspective, certainly, to be perfect first time. Like all good design work, it requires iteration, right? So you were
Exactly.
iterating on the prompt that you were going to give to Figma Make, and then you were iterating on what Figma Make created as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then basically I was iterating and I come up with this version of prototype, but I did like, I don't know how many iterations or how many chats versions, in this chat. It was like really a lot. And of course, it went into this hallucinating mode. So it wasn't fixing the problems. The prototype didn't work. So wasn't a good thing. But in the end, I got the result that I was able to basically share with the team members, gather some first feedback. And by the way, it was done within 1 day or something. So this is how fast it can be done. You start the day with nothing and you go home with a full solution that you just need to design. That's it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's so impressive. So yeah, gathered feedback, discussed it with my product manager, showed some developers. It was like really well accepted, but we had some things to work on. So I started iterating and I come up with a new prompt. Basically, I was building it also using ChatGPT a little bit, but it wasn't that much as the first time. The thing is that basically I fed all this. This is one prompt, by the way, so this is everything. I fed everything into new chat because I decided that the previous version was already stupid, so I wanted to start new one. And what was delivered, it was this thing, so absolutely out of space. I don't know what we have here even. So I learned my lesson here that the longer prompt you kind of create, even though it will be like super well structured, super well thought of, AIs don't really like the long prompt. Better to work with, I think, with smaller prompts and then iterate in smaller iterations. So this is something that I decided to do next.
The longer the prompt, the dumber things get.
Yeah,
That's really good. Yeah.
exactly. And yeah, so I basically created like, I split the prototype into two parts. So we have this filter section, then we have results section. So I decided, okay, I will do filters, then I will do table. And then I will basically iterate on the logic. So that's what I did. And actually, it went really well. So the first block was done. And then I was like moving with smaller like prompts, like just chats. So, okay, this button should work like that. This component should be on the top. This component should be on the bottom, etc. So this was like iterating with smaller steps. And yeah, and basically in the end, I finally got what I wanted to get. So as I mentioned before, that we have three main use cases. And the first use case, it's when basically user lands on the prototype with one data set selected. And in this case, we show these specific filters because we know that these filters were used. We show some information about this data set, etc. So basically, when the first use case is covered, also we can select more than one data set. And in this case, we show more filters because we know that if it's more filters selected, it's rather exploration, some, I don't know, investigation happening rather than with one data set. And the third case, also a little bit different set of filters. It's for search activity. So this is the logic behind that I was able to implement here.
So, just to go back over this part of it as well, you ended up breaking the problem down into the filters and then the results. So you had two different parts that you were iterating
Exactly.
based on the initial concepts. And then while you were iterating those two different parts, you got down into what looked like much more fine-grained detail. So much shorter requests about specific parts of the UI and what you wanted changing.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay. So basically, for example, I wanted filter to work the way in specific way. For example, I wanted to see more filters so they would open and I would say what kind of filters they should be shown, what each drop down for filter should have, etc. So that was quite a detailed work. The filters was done. Then I moved to the next iteration, which was results table. So the prompt for results table was quite small. Also iterated with the smaller prompts, etc. So and actually I would say again, this whole new version of prototype, it took maybe 2 hours for me to finish. So we are talking about 1 day, 2 day work for such a complex functionality of the solutioning, ideating solutioning.
Mm-hmm.
And then basically we've been able already to share this prototype with the team, with users, etc. So yeah, that was quite fast. So basically once I did finish the filters part, I moved on to the table. And important thing to point out that the selection of data set impacts on the table behavior. So for example, if we have more than one data set, then we would show information in table about this data set. So table becomes bigger. In case if you don't have selected that data set, the same thing is going on. So if you would look here, we basically have data set selected, one data set, and I see all information about this data set here on the screen. But if you select 0 data sets or more than one, then data set information should be in the table because it's important for comparison and other use cases. So
Okay.
I was actually able to introduce this logic in the prototype, which helped a lot because this kind of part of the solution wasn't it's not really straightforward, but we did this to improve performance of the query builder, because if we cover this case with one data set, then basically we don't need to load all of the data sets, all of the farm plots. So that was kind of thing that we had to do in order to kind of achieve our goals and improve it. So yeah, that was the little bit of constraint, I think.
And is that something that while you were doing the prototyping here with Figma Make, that you were able to understand better or kind of express better to the engineers?
Yes. Basically, they could click it and see what is happening with the table or with the filters if you selected one data set, more than one data set, or 0 data sets. So it was already kind of designed the way that it should work the same on the production.
Okay, great.
We delivered this project, I think, in less than a month. It's with development, testing, backend, front-end, design, everything.
Wow, yeah, that's that. Like just in terms of the efficiencies that you've seen here, about going from problem definition all the way through to a working prototype and then being able to get those requirements nailed and articulated through to engineering. That's so powerful, isn't it?
Exactly.
So what does this look like? Like, can you show us a demo of it actually working?
Yes, absolutely. Let me just quickly jump in. Yeah, this is our portal, and this is like updated version of Query Builder. And as you can see, I can choose one data set. I can also search by farm plot ID, etc., or by farmer ID. We have implemented like immediate search, and then you can choose like filters, different types of things here. We can have more filters, etc. So yeah, basically this is something that really was done super quickly, and this was like huge impact on the product, because we were basically able to lower down performance time from 30 seconds to 0.0.
Oh wow,
That's quite
crazy.
an
That's
improvement.
crazy improvement.
Yeah, and actually, like, we already got a lot of good feedback, and that the filters are compact. It doesn't take that much place, so you basically have like some place to see that there are some results, because before that, the query builder was taking all of the place. So yeah, that was pretty fun.
So looking at this real version, the actual built version, those filters that you were dropping down there and looking at the options for those, did you go as far in the prototype as actually building out each of those filter options?
Yeah, exactly. I did, and I can show it to you on the prototype. Yeah, so if we would go back to the query builder, so basically it looks very similar. We did have some user tests, and therefore, like in the beginning, we wanted to show like only 2 filters, but our clients were a little bit concerned with where is the filters. So we decided to show more. But yeah, so basically you can see all filters here. And for example, yes, you can select the risk levels, etc. So you can do basically the same as you can do in the prototype or
That's
in the
amazing.
on the like in both of this.
In the
And
real version.
for example, also the thing is, for example, I don't select anything. I apply query. I have one dataset selected, and we have this amount of column, so it's like limited, and
Oh, yeah.
information about dataset is here. But if I, for example, choose two datasets, so we have information about the datasets also here, so we can compare different datasets between each other. So yeah, that's
So this is in the prototype, you built this to show that kind of level of detail.
yes,
Yeah, I think
yes.
this is the point to really focus on, isn't it? Like the fidelity of these prototypes that you can create, the kind of conversations that these prototypes allow you to have with everyone, you know, your users, the engineers, product managers, and support teams. I think the quality of the conversations is so much higher because you can get to such a level of kind of
Exactly.
fidelity, right?
It's improved my like possibility to explain the solution so significantly. We have less question, less back and forth. So it's really like improves the efficiency in so many levels.
Okay, so I've got an example as well that I wanted to talk about, and this is something that I've been kind of quite passionate about as well, seeing how far a designer can push building something. My background is in engineering many years ago, so I'm quite familiar with sort of some of the more kind of detailed software engineering processes and some of the middleware platforms that are needed to build these kind of applications. So I'm quite comfortable working in this space. And I've been using for this project a combination of Claude Code and Cursor to build out a lot of this, a lot of what I'm about to show. So for me, the case that I wanted to talk about was my portfolio. So I've completely rebuilt my portfolio, and it sort of looks a bit like this now. And the idea that I had, the shower thought idea that I had that led to this was, you know, one of the biggest challenges with a portfolio is that, especially someone, you know, I've been in the industry a while and I've done lots of different things. How can I make sure that I'm shining a light on the most appropriate parts of my portfolio to someone who's looking to hire me that's relevant to the job that they're looking to hire for? And wouldn't it be great if the portfolio itself understood the job that they're looking to hire for and could do that sort of shining of the light on a per job basis, so that everyone coming to my portfolio gets a unique personal experience highlighting the stuff that's most relevant to them? Well, that's kind of what I've built, what I was able to build.
Well, that's a
So,
brilliant idea, to be honest. Like it's amazing.
yeah, it's one of those moments where you go, like, oh yeah, that's a great idea, but then actually when you build it and you can use it for the first time,
Yeah.
like you're saying, you know, you can turn these ideas around quite quickly. You can really quickly see that there's value to this isn't just a sort of crazy idea, that actually this has got some real kind of purpose to it as well.
Yeah, and in our world, when the companies get so many applications and they don't spend the time for just like looking at your portfolio to show exactly what they need, it's like amazing.
Yeah, for sure. It's two parts. So the first part, when someone gets sent a link to the portfolio, they'll go straight into this timeline view. So this is one of the UIs that I've built for it, and the user can come in and they can see this timeline of jobs or experience, and then they can see on the right hand side here a little bit of AI generated text that describes how this piece of experience or this piece of work directly relates to the particular job that they've come to see, and it will talk about the parts of their job description that this most closely matches to. So this is personalized for each job. And then once a user gets to the end of these kind of curated stories in my portfolio, they can click a button and they can go to this card view. And this was really the first UI that I had in my head when I thought about this whole portfolio. It was this idea of having a deck of cards where each one of those cards represented something unique in the portfolio. And then it was up to the user to choose which of these cards that they were most interested in, and then kind of remix their own portfolio each time. So actually this has kind of had quite a big pivot, this whole idea. It started with this as the UI, where it sort of encouraged the user to choose some options and then go through to the timeline. And actually after building this and then getting some feedback on it, I pivoted it so that it now leads with this idea of the timeline first, and you can come into this set of cards afterwards. It started like this, basically. So I did actually use V0 to start this off. So I sketched out some of these ideas in Figma.
Oh, nice.
And with showing the different states. So this has got a couple of different examples for the card layouts. I tried some that had the categories on the side, some that had them on the top. I had this idea in the original version of a kind of shelf at the bottom. So as the user chose the cards, they would fly out of the pack and sort of dock themselves into the bottom. And that was really quite neat. And I spent a lot of time trying to perfect that animation, trying to make the card disappear from the pack and appear at the bottom. And I just couldn't get it working. And I literally must have spent hours just on this particular view, getting the card fan layout working and getting that animation working. And it's kind of crazy, really. Like, you've got to, I think one of the lessons learned for me has been making sure you're really clear about where you're spending your time. Also knowing when to stop, knowing when you've got to about as far as you can with the AI kind of solution to something.
Actually, this is a very good point, because I think we all found each other itself in this loop conversations with AI, where you just basically try to get to the point that you want to do something for you, and it just doesn't. Yeah, that's a very good point. We need to learn how to stop.
Yeah, definitely. Getting these cards appear as this kind of fan layout, that was something where I didn't give up on it, actually. I kept persisting, and eventually it worked. Eventually it managed to get it. But getting it to animate down to this bottom shelf and getting it to stack the cards at the bottom, that is just something that I couldn't. It was this massive diminishing returns where I was just spending, many iterations trying to get it to work, and it lying to me constantly about the fact that it's fixed it, it understands what the issue is, and it hadn't. So I ended up pulling that whole piece just out. So that's not ideal, because that's an idea that I had that I wanted to articulate that the prototype wasn't able to do. So I think that's another lesson learned, really, is that, if you're trying to do something novel or really complex or quite different to a pattern that it's seen before, that it might not be able to articulate it. So you might have to fall back on your other design tools to be able to tell that story in a different way rather than the prototype, and sort of to appreciate that that's fine. With the current technology, these AI prototyping tools aren't going to be able to do everything you want. So, don't worry about having to use other tools alongside it. So I gave it all these inputs, and we did many iterations to get this UI right. We ended up with this as a portfolio timeline, which was great. This is some of the first versions of the timeline it created. Were pretty spot on to start with. But what I wanted to do was to really, quickly iterate on these little cards, make them more interesting, make the challenges and the solution and the impact for each of these cards a bit more punchy as well. So we ended up going through a few different iterations of that. I actually gave the system some design feedback in the same way that I would do to someone in my team, right? A bit of design critique. So I did some red line documents, as we would have called them back in the Microsoft days, saying, no, this isn't right because this needs to go here and this needs to go here. This is the improvements I want you to make. And this was really helpful, actually. This was really productive. It was able to do exactly what I wanted. So you can see here that this is what it came up with eventually, which is a much better idea, a much better layout, and actually much more kind of what I wanted it to do. So some of the existing patterns that you're using within your team with other humans can also be used here with AIs as well. These kind of patterns for design feedback are still as relevant and still
Yeah,
really
that's
effective.
actually, I never tried that, but I will, because yeah, that's a good idea.
One of the challenges that these current platforms have is that the kind of interface to communicate with the AI is just a text box, right, at the minute. Really, it's kind of like you've got to describe what you want in words, and that's fine, but that can only go so far. I do a lot of screenshots of stuff, sending it screenshots and saying, look at this, look at what's happening here, this part of it isn't right. But sometimes it doesn't interpret those screenshots correctly. It sort of misunderstands from the text. So being able to do something like this kind of bridges that gap between what you really want and what is actually happening much more effectively than text, I think. This is actually the version it came up with first. This was one of my earlier iterations. So you can see it's kind of got the general idea for how this card layout should work. It's obviously got the text sizing wrong, and some of the kind of card component layout isn't obviously not ideal here. But this initial prototype was working, and you could choose some cards, and it would take you through to the timeline. So a little bit like you were saying, where you got the kind of framework, the kind of top level structure of the thing you wanted to build established first, and then you working with the AI, you focused on specific areas. That's the same pattern I used here. So we got this kind of initial prototype working, and then I went, right, let's focus on getting these cards correct. So we spent quite a lot of iterations on getting these cards dialed into what I wanted them to be, getting the specific behaviors right as well. There was a lot of kind of pain and a lot of frustration, and I actually might have ended up swearing at it quite a bit. I think it might have used some very colourful language, but I think with patience and with a bit of tenacity, and I think also a sort of good understanding of when you might not be able to get down the road you're looking to get down with the AI, and backing out and looking for another way of doing it. I think you can really create some really quite compelling products, really quite compelling experiences. This platform, I've called it Folio Flow. This is actually a product that I'm going to be open sourcing as well. So this is something I'm going to be giving back to the design community as a way for them to learn, as much as having a portfolio of their content in this portfolio platform. I actually want to provide it as an opportunity and as a vehicle for them to learn how to do AI coding, how to become a design inventor, and because I think these are the kind of skill sets that are going to be incredibly useful for designers going forward. So they could use this as a tool for that.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And actually, the level of details and what you like, the system that you were able to build here, it's very impressive. Even with this AI, let's say, kind of constraints right now, that it's not that good as it could be in future. But yeah, that's perfect. And I think we, as a designer, we all need to learn how to use it, how to code with AI and such.
Yeah, for sure. Great. Okay, so let's wrap up that section actually by talking about some of the sort of tips and tricks that we've experienced in the past. What would you say, looking back, we've talked about some of these already, would you say are some of the kind of most important things people need to remember when they're trying to use these kind of Gen AI tools in design work?
That's a good question. Well, the first thing I think it's a very it's a theme of our conversation is that don't expect from AI that it will do your work for you. So you still will be working, you still will be doing, but expect that it will make your life much more easier, and you will be much more efficient with the execution. So this is for sure. What else? Also, this approach that you used and I used in my prototype, that we are like to come to AI with something in our head already. So we cannot come to AI just like do this for me and that's it. When you basically start working with this, some kind of idea in your head, always go from big to small, and then you kind of adding up with smaller iterations, because if you have your whole idea described into Google Docs pages, and just feed it to it, it's in most of the cases it's not going to work. I think this is my kind of highlight about that. What's yours?
Yeah, I think knowing when to stop as well, like knowing when it's got to the point where it's not going to get any further. And it's really hard because I would say half the time that I've gone down a path and I'm like on iteration 35, I'm like pulling my hair out because it's just not getting there. I would say half the time persisting or explaining it in a slightly different way again, or providing some of those like guideline documents where you can point out exactly what's wrong visually, give it a better steer. Half the time that works and half the time it just doesn't. So I think once you've used the systems enough, I think you get a sense, for an intuitive sense, I think, for whether going down this path is worthwhile or not, don't you? I think
that's very wise, I would say, because sometimes like I am guilty of it, to stuck in this like iterations. Okay, my dog is snoring.
Your dog also agrees that you can get stuck in these iterations.
Yeah, he's tired also of these iterations.
I think that's definitely an important thing to know. The other thing that I've found is these AI systems there's probably like 4 main AI, LLMs, kind of Gen AI systems in the world, and they each do things in a very different way. They might have what look like very similar outcomes, but something like Figma Make and V0, and then getting into some of the more engineering ones like Claude or Claude Code or Cursor or Gemini, for example, they all have very different ways of thinking, which means that if you think you've got to the end of what one can do and you're struggling to get it to get anywhere better, switching to one of the other tools, giving it all of what the one tool has already done and saying, right, I'm stuck, can you improve this? That's been another really good way, I think, of unlocking problems in the past. So I'll be working on something in Claude Code and it won't be able to fix a problem that I've got, and then I'll switch to Cursor and go, right, I'll get Claude to describe the problem that it can't solve in a document. So it will write all the documentation, all the planning stuff, all the things it's tried to do. And then I'll give that to Cursor and say, right, look at the documentation that Claude has left you. look at the things that it said it was struggling with, and now it's your job to try and solve it.
Nice. That's actually a very good suggestion. I also like to incorporate different AIs between each other and try something in one, then in another. So yeah, that's definitely something that worth to do, especially when you have something more complex.
One of my biggest tips is if you're going to get into the world of looking at AI tooling for design, is to sort of go into it pragmatically. Practically, what value can I get out of these tools? Don't get excited by the technology. Don't try and, like you were saying, replace your workflows entirely overnight with any of this stuff. Kind of come to it with a healthy sense of skepticism, I think, and explore it. And also, because the technology is changing so frequently, I mean, I don't think I've ever experienced the pace of change in this technology in my whole career as I am now with some of these AI systems. Each of them are trying to outdo each other. So you've got to come to each one of these tools that you're trying with a healthy skepticism, but keep trying different tools. Don't get stuck into the rut of just using V0 or just using Figma Make.
Right. And I just remember that one more thing that probably I would like to say is that right now there are a lot of kind of fear of AI on market. And I would say that I kind of see where it's coming from, but I wouldn't say that AI is going to replace us within next few years. So it's definitely extremely useful tool for you. And since it will be evolving, it will be changing, it's just the beginning of the path. I think that we all need to also, as you mentioned, come there as open-minded people. We need to learn it. We need to know how to use it in our daily job, how to apply it the way that it will make us better professionals, make us better, rather than stick with some older practices. So yeah, that's I think very important to have in mind.
Okay, I've got some predictions for the future, and I want you to tell me what you think of them. Tell me whether you think they're going to be true whether you think that there's something else that's going to happen, or whether you think we're already there,
Oh,
right?
wow.
Because it's kind of crazy, isn't it? The technology is changing so frequently. Talking about the future, the event horizon for this stuff seems so short.
Yeah, exactly. It's very hard to predict. Like a year ago, we didn't use it, or we used it a year ago. 2 years ago, we didn't use it.
So, okay, here's one of the things that I think is important to think about for the future. I think sometimes designers can struggle to be understood in organizations, right? I think certain organizations that don't have a kind of design ethos kind of culturally embedded into the way that their senior leadership think means that design can sometimes be seen as a bit of a service, a bit of something that happens at the end of the process, or something that once the engineering and product management teams have figured something out, then design comes in and does a thing, and then it's kind of um, impact is very limited. So I think sometimes designers can be a bit exposed, and the value of design can be a bit undervalued in organizations. That coupled with this idea that I think a lot of senior leadership might think that AI will help them to become more efficient, will be able to help them, not hire as many people, to cut their kind of operating costs by replacing people with AI. I think those two things could be a real kind of dangerous confluence there. So I think for me, the future, one of the really important things from a design perspective of the future of using AI is for designers to get ahead of the game and to start leading the conversation about how AI can be used as a tool in their domain, rather than allowing this stuff to happen to them. What do you think of that?
I completely agree. That's really really important to start talk about it first and actually learn first, and then introduce your company into this. So basically, we started like pushing from the bottom first, like in terms of like product team.
Yeah,
We started using AI, and then we showed that okay, let's see what we can do with that. And it
yeah,
was really welcomed because the leadership, when they see how efficient you can be using these tools, they will value you more as a person that can use these tools, that can be a valuable addition to the team. So yeah, that's absolutely true.
yeah. Don't let this happen to you. Get ahead of it and be part of the change. Yourself.
Yeah, we need
Drive
to
it.
own it.
Own it. That's a great way of putting it. Yes, absolutely right. That is it. Designers need to own this change rather than allowing it to be them to be owned instead. And then, okay, so another prediction. So I think we talk about what parts of the design process can the AI help with, and I think for me it's the busy work. That's really where I think in the future it's going to be able to help. So we talked a lot about prototyping today and how you've used it for prototyping, and I've talked about how I've been able to do this design inventor thing, or I've been able to build whole applications. But actually, I don't think that's necessarily where the main value is. I think in the future, not even in the distant future, like, the next couple of months, really, 6 months, we'll be able to use some of these tools to help us with, for example, the whole end-to-end design system and component creation.
Okay, actually,
What do you think of that
I
idea?
have an example for that. It's not, of course, it's not nearly what we will have in the future, but when I was building the components for our design system, I was like, since like it's like a lot of states, and I would ask ChatGPT just list me all of the states, and how they should be changed, just describe it in words. I don't
Mm,
need the picture, and
hmm
it's kind of made my work faster as well, because I don't think about a lot of details, a lot of like smaller stuff. So I
Yeah.
can like basically allow AI to think for me in this kind of cases and use my brain actually for something more complex.
That I think is the key. That's a really, really good point. And again, it comes back to how designers see AI not as a threat, but as an opportunity, as a tool for them. It will allow you to automate a lot of the boring stuff that you don't really enjoy doing anyway, right? But you have to do, so that you're then freed up to do a couple of extra options when you're coming at the concept phase, right? You've got more time to think more divergently, come up with better options. You've got more time to dig into that research insight one more time and get your kind of head more fully around it. You've got more time to build those relationships with research, with engineering and with product management, to really get a sense of what the priorities that the business have got are. Like all this stuff that, you know, designers would love to be doing, but frankly don't have the time, you know, to do a lot of the time because they're delivering, right? And a lot of that could be, so you end up solving higher order problems, I think, as a designer by using these tools to do your busy work.
Yeah, even now, like I remember there were like times where we would design full flows in Figma, you know. And right now we don't need to do that because we already have this prototype. So certain parts already like go away, and you don't need to create screen for each state,
Yeah.
etc. So yeah, that's really working already. It's already visible.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? So it's reminded me of a discussion I had with a designer a few years ago. So they were a big fan of Axior for building
Ah,
prototypes,
okay.
which is it's kind of it's basically, so it's been around for years and it's so detailed that you can basically build an entire working application in this tool in a WYSIWYG interface. And my point was always, I don't think as a designer you should be spending your time engineering a solution in this prototyping tool, because I think the return on investment, the hours that you've spent, you know, tweaking this tool to get it to do exactly what you want, this design tool effectively, isn't worth it at that stage. But with these new Gen AI tools doing it for you, that balance has completely shifted. Now you can do that level of fidelity. You can articulate a prototype, you know, to that kind of in that kind of broader way, but without spending all the time manually doing it yourself. So now all of a sudden the scales have tipped, and I think it is worth designers building prototypes that are that high fidelity again because the cost is so low.
Yeah, exactly. The cost is low, and again, not saying that we don't need engineers, etc. We need them for complex things, but like simple things, I don't know, like input or something that can be used already.
Okay, well, this is getting me onto another prediction then. Actually, that's a good segue. So imagine a world where actually, let me take you back. Let me take you back to when I used to work at Microsoft. Microsoft used to have in the design team these people that were design engineers. So the design team would be responsible for concepting, research, but then actually delivering the front end.
Wow.
So the engineering, yeah, so the design team would deliver to the rest of the business, to engineering, a fully working front end that was basically mocked out with fake data. And then it
Mm-hmm.
would be the engineering job's turn to take that front end and integrate it with the rest of the product, with the rest of the architecture, get it working with real data and et cetera, et cetera. Now, what that meant was that the interfaces were built by people who loved the interface, right? People who loved getting those micro interactions right. And you know, you could argue about the cost of or the benefit of spending that much time building it, you know, in the design team. But what we did build was incredibly high quality experiences. Back in the day, Windows Phone, if anyone's listening is old enough to remember Windows Phone, that was built by the design team. The front ends of that were built by a design team. And, you know, although Windows Phone wasn't massively successful as a commercial product, the design of it, the user experience of that platform, I think is one of the best, has been one of the best smartphone phone
Yeah.
platforms, because the same people who had the concept could then also execute it. So, all right, imagine a future where the design team can use some of these Gen AI tools to actually build out more of the front end componentry and actually deliver more of the kind of final production front end code to the business for them to then focus on other areas of the product, like, you know, performance and scaling and infrastructure and all the other good stuff. How do you feel about that?
I think this makes absolutely total sense. I don't see it coming just immediately yet, because like the quality of what I was trying to, you know, match my designs with prototype, and it's never like, first of all, it looks really terrible. Second of all, I even like inside of the team we intentionally decided that we won't try to match prototypes from AI with designs, because we've noticed that our clients on the interviews, they're basically a little bit confused. They kind of they see it as a little bit bad implementation, like
Yeah.
half workable thing. So that's why basically all the prototype I did, I'm doing them like very plain, very like far away from the final designs, etc. But in future, I think it's going there for sure. I think that again for front end engineers, it will be also a really nice case that they will be working on something more interesting, more strategic, rather than spend time on states of this input or
Yeah.
drop down, etc. So yeah, that's absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. It lets everyone focus on higher order problems, doesn't it? All the way through the production chain. Okay, good. Here's another one then. What about this idea that you could so there's this concept in engineering, software engineering called linting,
Mhm.
which is where it's a way to make sure that the code you're writing conforms to a certain style, and so it
Mhm.
goes through a linting process. So it's not, is this code correct? Is this code in the same style as the rest of the code? Does it kind of conform with all the other code in the rest of the platform as a kind of holistic approach? Well, I think we could end up with a process where part of the design production process is to do the equivalent of code linting, but for design. So you
Mm.
could do things like contrast checking, accessibility checking against standard guidelines. You could look for things like spacing anomalies
Oh
in
wow, that's beautiful.
Figma things that you were creating, stuff that wasn't aligned to grids. Even things like, if you've written some copy, does the terminology deviate from what you've defined in your design system's style guide? So it's like all of these things are not technically incorrect. They're just inconsistencies that might get missed and then end up going into production designs and being built. But if you could have a system that used AI to look for some of these problems in a process like this, I think, that could be a really interesting
Oh my
step
God,
change as well.
I love that idea. I think Figma should already start implementing that tomorrow.
Figma, if you're listening, you can have that idea, right? We're
It
just going
would
to be
be like
credited.
wonderful, seriously, especially that we already use design system and libraries. Why it should be in the library? So, kind of you design this like design the screen, but it's kind of automatically already there. That's would be perfect. With copy, it's a little bit more harder, but I think that's possible as well. Not in Figma though.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, it does need to become part of the process, doesn't it? Yeah. What we need to do is create, and I'm sure people have rigged together a process a bit like this elsewhere, but we need something a bit more formal, I think. A kind of engineering teams have this continuous integration, continuous delivery, CI/CD process,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
where they're regularly checking in small amounts of code and it's getting a full build, and then you can test the full build. I think we need a similar kind of process from design as well, where we go, right, this piece of design is finished. I'm going to, commit this Figma file,
Mm-hmm.
commit these Figma changes, and then that's where these kind of AI powered linting processes could kick in. And not just checking for consistency. Imagine if you checked in your Figma file, and then a prototype came out at the end of it, just was built for you. There you go. Figma
Yeah,
has built you a Figma Make prototype automatically, or tweaked an existing prototype to the design changes that you've just made,
yeah,
that's now ready for user testing. So at any point you've got an asset there that's ready for you to start user testing. I mean, it's crazy, right?
yeah. That's actually really cool. I wish it was there already.
We can make this happen, Tali. Come on, we can make this happen. I think one of the things that I'd like to just finish on in terms of the future of AI in design is this idea of generative UI.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you saw the news recently. Gemini
Yeah.
3, the new Google's new version, is able to create UIs that are, when they user tested them, nearly on par with the kind of UIs that humans can create. Now, I dug into this a bit more, and if you look at the results of that, some of the UIs that they were creating were very basic. They were very sort of simplistic, kind of
Mm-hmm.
form-based interactions. They weren't whole applications, so they were quite limited. But I think it's interesting, the sort of progress in the technology in that space, right, where the these agents can create UI that is being generated almost on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a couple of things to think about here that I think are interesting. I'd like to get your thoughts on. One of them is, what do you think? What does that do? What does that do for the future of human design if these systems are getting better and better at creating user interfaces? But also, secondly, if your system can take the data that it has, understand the data that's needed from the user, the kind of
Hmm.
decisions or questions that are needed from the user, and then actually create a user experience with UI components and everything that is tailored to that user with the data that they have and the data that they need to collect, so that everyone gets their own kind of personalized app rather than a generic app that's been designed to try and appease to everyone. What does that do to the sort of future of design, do you
Well, I
think?
think it's like a next level, to be honest, of user experience. We will be able to solve so many problems, and again, this is speed ups the process. For example, if you buy something, yeah, online, whatever, yeah, that's going to be like really, really next level. And I think that level of personalization that it will provide, I think it's like, yeah, really game changer. I'm not sure like how it will work. I'm wondering about this personal data thing as well. So this is something that kind of can be questionable and a little bit ethically. We need to explore this part. But
Yeah,
otherwise, in terms of just user experience and even user satisfaction, because if user don't need to spend any time on something, that's perfect for you, for user.
interesting, interesting. Okay, let's wrap it up then. Any kind of final closing comments or thoughts you want to leave people with?
Yeah, I think just explore like with open eyes the AI, try to implement it into your life and see what's going on, what's happening.
Yeah, I love that. I would say I would totally agree with that as well, but I would also caution people, I think, to outsourcing their creativity to these kind of deterministic machines. I mean, remember what these things are, right? They are not replacements for what humans are able to do and what humans value doing as well. So realize their limits and believe in yourself, I think, as a designer and the value of what you do in terms of human creativity. You know, you're doing something that no machine can currently do. So, value that, you know.
Yeah,
I think remember that LLM, the large language models, are not the path to a digital god. It's not. It's not how we're going to be able to create these kind of all thinking AI systems. So the value of human creativity, I think, is still, certainly for the short term, massively valuable and important.
yeah,
So yeah,
that's true.
believe in
That's true.
yourself.
That's very important point.
Good stuff. All right, let's wrap it up there. Tali, thank you so much for your time. I think this has been massively eye opening for me and enlightening, and I just wanted to say thank you again for helping kick me into the path of understanding this, and hopefully these discussions are going to help kick others into the path as well.
Thank you for the invitation, and I really impressed what did you do with portfolio and how much it's kind of evolved from the first conversations about that.
It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah, good stuff. All right, thanks everyone for listening, and yeah, we're
Thank
going to catch you in the
you.
next one. Bye
Thank
for now.
you. Bye bye.